Welcome to Leadership and People. This is a series that pulls back the curtain on leadership by interviewing CEOs, senior executives, and entrepreneurs who have had large exits. We ask these experts about how they built trusted networks to rapidly grow their companies and what advice they wish they knew if they could do it all again. In part 2 of our interview here with Jacob Hoehne, CEO of ISSIMO Story Agency.
Look first internally with, how you're taking care of your people. Because it can be a little scary, even the amount of influence or impact you have on those that you employ.
We're going to be diving deeper into what we just were talking about at the end of part 1. So if you missed that, really recommend going back and catching that. But Jacob, the show here, Leadership and People, we've been talking in the first episode a bit more about the leadership side of things. I want to talk about people and, as a CEO, how you choose where to spend your time and the benefits of being in the right place at the right time. And just kind of, specifically, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is, to me, you're kind of one of these people that lives that idea of like generosity as a competitive advantage. I've seen you were offering to, you guys I know take on pro bono stuff sometimes, and you were offering to help us out with stuff at the charity we started, Child Rescue, which turned into, when I was doing that work with the Vatican, Laudato Si, asking if you guys would potentially be willing to get involved with that. And then I know that's led to other business. Can you talk a little bit about what it was that you feel like, what it was at Laudato Si that really helped you guys decide this is the way you want to change your business to focus? And then also just kind of this nature of, you're not necessarily the most arm waving, loudmouth kind of guy, but you obviously know how to network. Can you talk about this?
Yeah. So rewinding a bit, it was
all 6 questions there.
Yeah. Well, it was a C4 trip to San Diego, and I'm trying to remember. I think you and I were in a critical questions group, and I think, as you were talking about your charity, it was like, hey, if it sounds like something worthwhile, love to be a part. If we need to, and that connection, and we had lunch at Sette Bello, a little bit afterwards, and tried to, see how we might be able to, donate some time to help that cause. But then, this crazy thing pop up that was, turned into the Laudato Si challenge, and the way that it's worked for me, as far as I've never heard a phrase, but I like that, of generosity as a competitive advantage. That's just the way that I'd want to live. I sort of say that I run a business to support my Santa Claus addiction, because I like sending people gifts and surprising them, or being doing things for people is how I feel fulfilled in my life. But it's, it's been interesting as, Corporate Alliance helped me grow my business significantly, early when I was starting out. And it's been interesting to see, though, the lessons I learned from that, building a business locally where I can, drop in and say hi to someone or take someone to lunch. As we've narrowed our focus to, cause brands and, more impact investing type stories, the clientele is really all over the world. We're starting a new project for an investment bank in the Netherlands, that we met, and it was just in Monaco, meeting with people and setting up opportunities. And it's harder to stay in touch with people like that, where you can't just, you won't see them at the next networking event. But the same thing of really listening to to them as a person, and finding ways to serve them. And it might be just a handwritten note, or, they mention they really like this restaurant and sending them something. I mean, as a way to stand out from the crowd or be, relevant. And plus it's fun to give people stuff, and so that's how those lessons have still translated, as the sales efforts are different, for me. Yeah, what were the other questions?
Well, no, I think this is a good thing, and I want to talk about this idea of the way you've chosen to take the direction. You look at these big CEO surveys that Deloitte or PwC or KPMG do, and they're constantly covering things like how much anxiety CEOs, maybe from the baby boomer generation, have about adapting to the millennial client. There's those people born kind of the 1980 to 2000, those 20 years in there is a huge portion of the population that are now having larger and larger portions of the buying power in society. And so as they look at becoming a more purpose-driven organization or things like that, can you talk about the transition and just, when you guys were flying around the world to make these videos for the Vatican, highlighting these businesses that are making the world better, maybe just any way that you went about that helped you get more business that way, and just what you've seen by trying to focus there?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how to rephrase that question.
Well, okay, so here's my question. For the rest of us who might want to have our business do more good in the world, you're obviously able to leverage the work you did with the Vatican into now working with many of these organizations that are very purpose-driven, very for purpose companies. They're a for-profit company that's making the world better. Any advice for the rest of us who want to become more like that?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the first things that comes to mind, I think there's a common things, maybe especially with tech companies, or it depends, but that that you want to set up your own charity that has, that does your own good, and you have your own pet project, and there could be a lot of good in that. There's also just so much redundancy in the nonprofit space, or in the so I guess backing up, I'd say do good, and there's good and better and best ways to do that, but I think don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. There's so many organizations that have spent decades figuring out processes and have the organizational structure and the connections and resources and boots on the ground to make a difference. And it's often, like you burn a lot of that goodwill trying to reinvent the wheel. So I think partnering with organizations that are already doing good and supporting them can take your, dollars further. I think the trend that is exciting is seeing that giving back or cause is companies are starting with it out with it being more part of their DNA than just sprinkled on top at the end, to kind of launder their image, is sometimes how it's seen. But it can be something as far as there's a day a month we go and volunteer. I think the more that you connect it to what you stand for, and that it's authentic to you, and that your motives are in the right place, I think you'll find something that is a good fit. You're a home builder, and maybe your guys go and build a habitat house. Awesome. And so the other part of it is, I mean, not that this is an excuse, but I think realizing too that providing a good culture where people can earn a living that can provide for their families is an act of community service. It really is something that makes our communities a better place by having a good place to work. And so look first internally with you know how you're taking care of your people, um, because the you know it's a little it can be a little scary, even the amount of influence or impact you have on those that you employ. Like you make it miserable for them, and you that ripple effect makes a lot of people miserable. Or if you can make them happy, and that can bless a lot of people, both their families and the people they interact with, but then also your your customers. I mean, I love Tony Hsieh's approach of, we don't have to they take care of the customer first, and when the customer's happy, I mean, sorry, when their employees is happy, they'll take good care of their customer, um, as opposed to over focusing on the customer and undervaluing the employee and having to put on a fake face that they're happy or that they're glad to do their job. Does that
Yeah.
make any sense?
Yeah. And I kind of want to go back to what you said about those, whether it's partnering or looking close to home first. When you think about these, just whether it's the large corporations or just the individual billionaires and folks at these events, that you're at. I know you're going to SoCap out in California coming up, and just this world that you're a part of now. Who's somebody that you feel like is doing it right? Who's somebody that you look up to, whether as an organization or as an individual?
I mean, the first guy that comes to mind is Eric Harv, who was the founder of Laudato Si. Like, he has he's incredibly generous, big heart, and is passionate and driven with what he's doing. Um, there's, I mean, Joe Ritchie is doing some amazing things, gathering like sort of this, you know, um, amazing group of people that have quote unquote made it, but leveraging all of their collective efforts to, make a difference in some developing countries and
And a lot,
so
yeah. So like a lot of people don't know Joe. I mean, unless they read the
yeah,
Fast Company article about going in Rwanda after the genocide and helping really work with the businessmen and the political leaders and everybody to grow their GDP back and kind of put that country back together. Is now like an advisor to all those presidents in Africa. But when you think about Joe and the way he interacts with folks, and it isn't like the look at me kind of show, right? Um, Tell me more about like what I know what I respect about Joe, but tell me what it is that brought him up for you, or what you think is different about him.
yeah, I think I mean, there, like you mentioned, you wouldn't suspect, the influence that he wields, but he could easily have stepped back decades ago and lived comfortably, but he really feels like it's his duty, his mission, and for him, it's part of his ministry, if you will, to to take both his expertise and the network that he's built over years and go make amazing things happen, and so taking the same lessons in Rwanda and taking it to Guatemala and some other places. But I think there's and maybe it's different seasons of your career, but if those that are approaching an exit and thinking, what am I do next? There's so much good that you can do, but I would say sometimes we put it out there as far as like when I'm a billionaire, then, but like I think a lot of that starts with how are you acting and behaving now, Um,
Well,
but
and
yeah, those
I want to ask about that because you've obviously gone through a lot of different staff over the years of running your business, just like anybody. Um, can you talk about that, of like both setting the example and then also like structurally having your organization be the one, like having it built into the organization to help everyone on the team start to live it now?
Yeah, I mean, and I only can speak to, our little boutique agency and how we've done things, but we have from the beginning tried to, you try a lot of different things to filter for culture fit and your hiring. But the two things that have come down for us that are sort of non-negotiables, that people who put people first, so we like to be compassionate creatives. Um, and the second is that they enjoy a good problem to solve and aren't threatened or scared away from that. And so,
So you're saying you screened for that when you're hiring?
yeah.
And then how do you reinforce it once they are hired?
Um, I think it's the way that we talk about, with there. So when push comes to shove on things, which corners are you going to cut, or what things get in a forced hierarchy get put to the top? And we strive to be sure that we take care of the person and the relationship over the transaction.
Like
So even if
what could be an example of that?
so I mean, um, years ago, there was a client that we did. It involved the project involved a lot of different stock clips for this particular piece we were making, and when they saw the piece, they felt like there was, it was about, I think it was $10,000 ish of stock footage that were going into a variety of things, and they felt like, oh, they're when they had approved stuff, they they hadn't really didn't feel like we selected the exact ones that they thought we were. So there was some miscommunication or something, and we just said, we stepped back and said, okay, what do you feel like would be fair? What would make this right? And we were prepared to pay the whole amount, like not charge them for any of it. It was all somewhat on the table, and they're like, well, it ended up being we refunded, I think, $1,000 for just a little bit, but it was I guess trying to be, like that client though, we could have burned a bridge there, but they've represented probably $500,000 over the last decade of business since that event. So seeing it's seeing the lifetime value of a customer, and that's maybe also a little like that's still transactional focused, but the relationship, the human being, the connection is far more valuable than just holding, and you need to stand up for yourself at times, and there's times where they you can't always do that, but that one stands out to me because of the longevity of that relationship.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like your generosity, like your willingness to do that wasn't transactional willingness. Like we would be willing to eat this as long as we get your business. That it was like the genuine, we're here for you, even if this is the last, we'll eat this even if it's the last thing we do together kind of approach, it sounds like.
Yeah, it has to be. It can't ever be. Yeah, with strings attached. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I love it. I think that's a great place to end. We appreciate all the time you spent with us here.
yeah, you bet. No, happy to.
As far as if people want to come see your work and see your reel, where can people check out the stories you guys have made?
Yeah, so the best place, our website, issimo.co, so ISSIMO.co. And the very first video that's going to show up there is sort of our manifesto as well. I mean, we created it for that Laudato Si challenge, but in a lot of ways it embodies our philosophy towards life and business, and that gives a good idea of the kinds of things that we want to be doing too, as we're pursuing this new direction with impact and social good.
Love it. Thanks again.
And thanks, Jess.
Bye.
Hi, my name is Logan Wilkes and I'm the CEO of Corporate Alliance. A few years ago, I moved to San Diego to build a new market for us there. The biggest deterrent I had to success was I didn't know a soul. I often thought to myself, if I just had a thriving network or influence, this would go 100 times faster. To be honest with you, I had never felt so alone in my life because A, I didn't have an influence, and B, I didn't know anyone that was going through the same thing that I was. If you have ever felt like this and you are looking to grow your influence, join us at one of our upcoming events. You can check us out at corporatealliance.net and request an invite to one of our upcoming experiences.